Hello, welcome back to Saturn Sirens. Today we're going to be going over the 8th house. So that's going to be interesting. Also, I wanted to shout out the country that we have the most listeners from, other than the United States, is Norway. So, hi, Norway. I love you. I actually really like Norwegians. When I was in high school, I was like maybe a junior or something, and I just spent all my time Googling things about Norway. I think you say good morning, God Morgan. And me and my dad used to say that to each other. Anyway, off to you, Mary.
Hi, guys. So let's talk about the eighth house, a pretty intense area of life that the eighth house rules. It's kind of all over the place here with the eighth house. On one hand, it rules over our deepest, darkest fears, how we transform, how we regenerate ourselves. But then on the other hand, it also rules over shared resources and what we inherit, so inheritances. So the eighth house also rules sex, like the deep form of soul bonding sex, like where two souls merge into oneness. So not like the lighthearted, casual type of sex that we find in the fifth house. It also rules what happens after marriage. So what you inherit from your spouse, not just financially, but the way your personality changes after marriage as well. It rules over how we regenerate ourselves and how we go through those spiritual deaths and rebirths that we go through throughout life and how we reinvent ourselves. So it's a pretty deep area of life. Another thing the eighth house represents is hidden and secret knowledge of the world. The ancient wisdom that's been around since the beginning of time, occult knowledge, even things like astrology, although astrology is more so in the ninth house. The search for answers to life's mysteries begins in the eighth house. It's traditionally ruled by Scorpio and Pluto. So with the secondary ruler being Mars, I would say because of Scorpio. So whatever sign you have on your eighth house is how you transform. It's also a powerhouse. So usually the eighth house starts off difficult and then later in life becomes a source of power. If you have planets here, you're typically very private. Sometimes you're born into wealth. It just really depends. Some people think the eighth house is about past life karma, or it's linked to what we've done in past lives. I think we could really say that for all three of the water houses. But my eighth house is empty, so don't really have much experience with this area of life. But the ruler of my eighth house is in the ninth house, so it's in Taurus, and I have Jupiter there too. So I feel like this area of life has a lot to do with why I became an astrologer. I also have Aries here. What do you guys have in your eighth house?
I have Cancer and Vesta.
So just that asteroid?
Just one asteroid.
What about you, Pierre?
The moon in Pisces in the eighth house. I don't know. It's funny because I did a long time ago. There's these things called eighth housers and 12th housers, which are supposed to be really challenging placements. There's this woman, but she actually has like a group for eighth housers and 12th housers for anybody who has difficulties with those placements, and it's pretty interesting. I would say that for me, I don't know. I don't know if maybe it's just because I'm delusional, but like
That's Pisces.
I mean, yeah, I have challenges and stuff, but I'm always like, no, it's not. I mean, it hasn't been that hard having it. I think that, it's funny because the moon obviously represents the mother, and the eighth house represents death and inheritance and that kind of things. And so it's not even really until now, like my mother passed away almost a year ago, and I am in the process of dealing with her estate. I have Pluto opposite moon. So it's literally when she was in her final years, I was controlling her property,
Right.
her everything that related to her. So to me, that's more where my moon in the eighth house has started to become more clear. Although I will say with my desire to help people, it really is a desire to help people to understand their own value, which would be other people's values and self-value in the eighth house. And that is what I want to do with the astrology and other healing modalities.
Well, it's no wonder you're drawn to astrology.
And I've also heard like with the moon, it's also about cycles. And you guys know I'm all into the astrology cycles.
Yes.
Kind of like another thing that I think that moon for me represents.
Yeah, and the North Node. What about the North Node, Pierre? That's kind of a big deal.
My 8th house has more to do with, I don't know, it seems like I'm always studying whenever I have an 8th house transit or something. I don't know. I
It's
don't
like
know
the
what
hidden wisdom.
yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I do crave understanding of the world and occult, and I have gone through a lot of studying occult type things and spirituality and that kind of thing. And it did kick off when I had that spiritual awakening and really started getting into the Reiki and energy healing, on and on and on. So that is probably what it has to do.
It makes total sense to me, just as an outsider looking at you. I know you a little bit.
Yeah, it helps to have somebody outside of you to reflect back to you what things mean. When you're in the trenches, you're just like, I don't know.
I've glanced at your chart and I'm like, she has the most astrologer chart I've ever seen.
Oh, immediately, right?
It didn't even take much like looking into it. I was like, yeah, that's an astrologer.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I will accept that. I want to help people with these life cycles.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense with the moon where
you want to nurture people.
I don't really want to nurture people. I do, but I don't. I have conflict around that.
That seems pretty Aquarius to me.
I don't want people to be dependent on me. I want to help people get the tools.
Right.
It's just, I want people to be self-sufficient. I like to help people, but I would love if people look at their own birth chart so that they can understand these 8th house things that go on. I have gone through a lot of transitions and transformations. I have changed so much in my life, but I think with my moon there, I probably just feel like that's normal, even if it's not necessarily easy. And that's the part that I think I want to help people with, to understand these things are inherently built into us. We were literally given a guide when we were born to at least be able to figure out some of it, even if it's still difficult. It helps to identify what's going on so that you don't think there's something necessarily wrong with you. It's just how things go in this dimension.
So I'm not an 8th houser, but I am a Scorpio. So I kind of think that, right? What'd you say?
You're a 12th houser, right?
I'm a 12th houser, yes. So I think that when you have these challenging placements, they don't feel as challenging to you because it's just your normal and it's just like what you're built for. I feel that way about my placements, and I kind of hear that in what you're saying, that probably the average person would have been thrown off by certain things, but it's like a Tuesday for us.
Yeah, although I have seen people who have the same placements and they really have had it really
way worse,
really tough. I do recognize that, but even for them, that tough stuff would be harder for other people to get through as well. Same thing for like Scorpio people. It's a lot of toughness there, and there's a way to cope. So I was actually thinking today, and I was trying to figure out part of why I think, like Scorpios and Plutonians and 8th house, like, the hidden house people, like a lot of people don't trust them because I think that we do things strategically because we pick up on so much stuff. You know what I mean? So you're kind of like a couple steps ahead of people, and and
I feel that way about Scorpios. I'm like, what? I don't know if I trust you.
Hold on. I think that they don't trust people. People actually trust them a lot. They have a hard time trusting people. They're so skeptical, and it makes you super paranoid, I feel like, when you have placements in the 8th house.
Right, because you know why? Because you pick up on things before things happen, and so you're trying to protect yourself and prepare. So it seems sketchy, right?
Yeah.
And so and the reason you don't trust people is because you can see like what's underneath before.
You
a lot
could
of times
probably see like stuff that they're not even even aware about consciously. I feel like the eighth house or picks up on that.
Exactly.
It's funny, but I just had an epiphany just listening to you guys talk about the eighth house, especially when you have planets in the eighth house, because I don't have any planets in any of my water houses. I also don't have any water in my chart except for my North Node in Pisces and maybe Chiron in Cancer. So for the longest time, I felt like that gave me a disadvantage as to really understanding these houses deeply. And they're obviously the deepest houses of the chart. But now I'm realizing that actually it gives me an advantage to understand them in a rational way, in an unbiased way, especially with the eighth house. The eighth house, I feel like, gets very misunderstood, especially when you have the North Node in the eighth house, because you're kind of meant to do everything in life in a counterintuitive way almost. So we're always taught to be independent and to be self-reliant. You're meant to accept help from others. And if you don't, life puts you in situations that are, almost very unstabilizing to the point that you're forced to accept help from other people. But I get it, because I have Aries here too. And actually I have Ceres here. So, and I totally forgot, but the way that I feel like I share is like in a very independent way. And I also nurture people by giving them their independence, kind of like not the way you're supposed to do it in a way, because the eighth house is really about accepting help and being vulnerable and showing that vulnerable side to you so that you can experience intimacy with your partner. That's how it ties into sex. So when the North Node is here, I feel like it can make it very scary to like really be vulnerable with the other person. And they're so uncomfortable accepting, especially like financial help.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to fail at that one because every time, seriously,
everybody does. I feel like this one, most people do.
No, I mean, every time, like I am in a situation where I don't have anything right now. I have to accept help or I'm going to be like on the street. I feel like every time I'm in a vulnerable position, I meet people who take advantage of that. They think they can treat me any way that they want. And I wasn't really raised to accept that. I don't know. I'm not sure. I was thinking about that today. How do I want to accept help, but it's like every time I let my walls down or whatever, there's a person who's like, oh, well, I can pretty much treat you however I want because you're dependent on me. That
makes a lot of sense too, though, because of the South Node in Virgo. It's about, discernment. It's like balancing who to trust, but at the same time, trusting and surrendering completely with Pisces into the unknown with another person. It's a fine line and it's a hard one. I really feel like this is one of the hardest ones.
The funny part is, though, even when I moved away from home, like I always knew they were always there. So now that they're not here, I'm having the experience I feel like I should have had. I feel like that's the experience that a lot of people have when they're growing up. It's so terrible and, I can't trust anyone and all of that kind of stuff. Somehow it's going in the reverse. I'm not
probably because
happy
the moon is there. And you know how you're like ruled by the moon, like the first, I forget, I think it's like 7 years or something of your life, you're experiencing the moon mostly. And there are different planets that rule different periods of your life. But also that makes a lot of sense because your relationship with your parents was teaching you exactly what you needed to embody with the North Node. But I really do think that it's about balance, and it's a lot easier said than done, and to go so much in one direction or the other. So it's like this art form, and I feel like that one takes several lifetimes to really master.
Well,
and also
we need to get this
creates
one
a
done
lot
this
of
one
fear.
because I'm not coming back.
Well, exactly. That's why I try to be really stern when I do readings and they have the North Node in the 8th house, because a lot of times from my observation, they're not even like remotely embodying that North Node, but you definitely are. But also I think it has to do with life creating situations that are very destabilizing to push you out of the 2nd house. But the thing with the 2nd house too, and that Taurus energy there, is you can be really stubborn and stuck because it's stable and it's secure, and it's like really hard to leave that nest or to leave that sense of security that you've built for lifetimes behind. And with the North Node in the 8th house, your soul wants to feel alive and wants you to like take risks, almost like not like near-death experiences, but the risks that make you feel like alive, like you're living on the edge. And that's something I read specifically in the Astrology for the Soul book. And I was just like, that's so counterintuitive. And I feel like most caution you against that. So how would you even know with this North Node that you're supposed to take,
I don't know.
scary
I did
risks
that.
and
The stuff that I've done in my life, I've done that. I don't know. I'll tell you, they say that somebody with the North Node in the 8th house wants to live on the edge. I don't think I want to live on the edge.
I feel like it's counterintuitive. Like most people don't. I feel like most people want to have stability and security and live life like on the safe side.
I feel like I can add to that. Like with my North Node in Scorpio, I want to, but I sometimes really don't. And I just fall back on like safety and stuff like that.
Oh, I want to. I have no problem with that. I think because I have Aries there. But also the North Node is transiting my 8th house. So the last time it transited my 8th house, I moved from a different country back to the US. So that was a huge one. This time I'm also moving. I just found out, but way less drastic. I'm just moving to a different apartment. But I think it's because the ruler is in the 9th house, sitting with Jupiter too. So that makes a lot of sense for me because I feel like the 8th house is really hard to understand. I've always felt that way. And I even made a video about it and it went pretty viral because everybody felt seen for once. All the 8th housers were like, oh my God, this is thank you. And the video was about how you also inherit spiritual gifts from the 8th house based on the planets you have there. So because my 1-year-old son has the moon there, I feel like the 8th house is, it's hard to understand because it rules that energy. Like it rules that the mystery is secrets. It's like what you keep secret and private too. So when you have the North Node there, it's hard to discuss it even with people because it's just murky. Like the 8th house, very murky. Probably not as much as the 12th, but
I mean, some people always say, oh no, 8th house or whatever, but I like it. Probably like you said, because I'm comfortable with it. I feel like the things that I've figured out over the past 20 years have been empowering. I think probably a lot of that comes from that 8th house moon.
let's talk about synastry with the 8th house because
Okay.
the 8th house synastry, God, you literally feel like you are going through a death and rebirth like 24/7. And your fight or flight gets so triggered. There's this like deep obsession with the person where you like go between love and hate so much. And it really like awakens a side of you that you never really knew existed. And I feel like it's that way when it's the sun or the moon in the 8th house, maybe the ascendant. Everything else, not as much. Like Venus and Mars, more subtle, but when it's somebody's sun or somebody's moon especially falls into your 8th house, I like have no words to describe this one, but it's so intense. It really is. And they really show you a side of yourself that you tried to keep under control for so long, and it's like the beast gets let out and all of a sudden you're like obsessed and weak in the knees for this person, and it's really uncomfortable. I found it to be really uncomfortable myself. I'm curious to know if you guys ever experienced this, and Pierre, because you have your moon there already, so if it's like less intense for you.
I am a Scorpio, moon, and Venus. I can think of a couple examples of people I've had 8th house synastry with. It was the sun one time. I've had a couple different kinds of 8th house synastry, and I was obsessed with those people, but I was also equally obsessed with other guys that I did not have 8th house synastry with. I have 8th house synastry with all my romantic interests because I am just that way. That's
Well,
how
you're
I am.
Scorpio Venus. Yeah.
Yes, it is always that intense for me. So
I'm like, get away from me.
that's just who I am on the core of my being. Like, I will say that I feel like not just when I have 8th house synastry with somebody, but when I enter into that level of 8th house intimacy with somebody, it does bring out my more nurturing side, which might be normal, but I also feel like that's related to me having Cancer there.
Yeah, my son has that, and I'm just like, am I gonna die? We talked about that, but
You're gonna be fine.
I think unfortunately I'm gonna be still alive. So, but
Someday you will die, but it's not going to be before your time.
I really don't find it to rule death, because like, how would you know if you're already dead? Like, how would you even know that was anything to do with your 8th house? Although there's always your dad, so it's like, I don't know.
Well,
I have stuff to say about my dad.
Well, I don't know about I wrote down some of the traditional things. So it does say cause, nature, timing. I don't know. But I mean, definitely, I will say at this point, and you have to remember that not everything is activated. Things are activated differently. And like I said in the beginning of this, my 8th house moon became really clear to me recently because I have had to deal with a a lot of estate and trust and all of that kind of stuff here recently. Right now, Saturn is transiting my 8th house, and I'm still like, a lot of that stuff is delayed. I don't know yet about how you determine if that it is death, but there are things around death that it can relate to. Apparently, there's also like occupations of death. I mean, I'm not into any of that, but I wrote down some of them, like undertaker, coroner, hospice care worker, butcher, surgeon, medium, executor, which I've done, homicide detective. So there's so many things it can relate to. I've definitely seen that.
My dad had his sun in Aquarius in the 8th house from just the last few decades of his life, like the ones that I witnessed. He was always religious and spiritual, but in the most unconventional Aquarius way. He underwent like so many like deaths and transformations. He had one set of beliefs and it would die, and he would completely switch over to a new set of beliefs, and then that would kind of go to the wayside. And he was just like always reconstructing his beliefs, and he was a 9th house stellium in Pisces, so that was everything to him, his spiritual philosophical beliefs. He throughout his life just was not afraid to question things that people refuse to question, like sacred cows. He would always dig deeper and uncover the truth, and that was so important to him. And so I really view that as like the most Aquarius in the 8th house experience anyone's ever had.
Where was his Uranus?
His Uranus was conjunct his Pluto in the 3rd house in Virgo, opposing his Pisces stellium. It's actually exactly opposing his Chiron in the 9th house.
Yeah, I knew it had to be like in the 3rd or in the 9th house. Because usually with the 8th house, I feel like it has to do with the 8th house, but I mostly feel like it has to do with Uranus in the 3rd house too.
And Pluto. Conjuncted.
Yeah,
I have
and
Uranus
Pluto
in the 3rd house too.
Yeah, and I feel like Uranians are constantly changing their beliefs. That's their life purpose, is to kind of, it's the multifaceted nature of Uranus, of like giving you all the different perspectives. Because Libra is really good at that, but Aquarius is where you really master that. Thanks to Uranus, you're able to see all different sides of the equation and look at things from outside of the box, and not just Mercury in Aquarius. I really feel like it's just Aquarius energy in general, or wherever you have Uranus as well, is really where you can kind of innovate things. And because Uranus also is like downloads. When they say like downloads from the universe, they're talking about Uranus. It's like that light bulb moment as soon as Uranus entered my 9th house, I started studying astrology. Like it came out of nowhere. I feel like Uranus, when it influences the 9th or the 3rd house, you should even write a book, because you're getting constant downloads from the universe. Like however you want to label it. I call it downloads because that's what it feels like. So yeah, I mean, I'm surprised your dad didn't write a book.
He should have. It was honestly like a tragedy that he didn't.
There's always a next
share
life.
More of his knowledge.
Oh yeah, I forgot you don't even believe in next lives, but
no.
I mean, who knows? Who knows if what happens after death? That's very 8th house, and I feel like we should end it that way, because no one has died and come back to tell us. Unfortunately, it's all speculation at the end of the day. It's all speculation at the end of the day, but I feel like 8th house is really where you want to know so badly, and you'll penetrate all the layers to find out. They make great detectives, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Mary, show your shirt. Saturn Sirens.
Saturn Sirens, yeah.
We're all gonna have them. We ordered them.
Yeah, I didn't know you guys didn't have them, so I feel weird.
She wore them.
So good.
All right, now we're going to record our weekly forecast, so tune into that on Sunday if you're listening to this on Saturday. We'll see you guys next time for the 9th house.
Bye.
Bye.